to state captured this morning. Last month, Booysen began testifying about how law enforcement agencies in the province were allegedly captured. He told the commission top-ranking officials interfered in investigations. Booysen also detailed how he visited former President Jacob Zuma's home in Nkandla to inform him how two of his relatives were implicated in investigations. Well, let's get more on the story. Let me bring in the SABC's Manqoba Mchunu live for us in Parktown, Johannesburg. Hey Manqoba, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So the former Hawks boss, KwaZulu-Natal Hawks boss, back in the hot seat. Get us up to speed. What were some of the salient points that came out of his the last time he was giving testimony?
Well, certainly, Blaine, we do expect the former KZN Hawks boss back on the stand here today. Of course, you'll recall that this particular phase of the commission is dealing particularly with the alleged capture of a security cluster system as well as the law enforcement agencies. So we're expecting to hear more evidence from the former Hawks boss on how those key institutions in the province were captured, as he had pointed out in that intro. Of course, last time he alluded to how some of the senior police officials in KwaZulu-Natal had been involved in attempts to try and interfere with sensitive cases, to try and frustrate some of those sensitive cases that were being investigated at the time. And I think one that stands out is the one of the Durban businessman Thoshen Pandey, who had been investigated, who was being investigated at the time for tender fraud. So he went into detail really about how the former acting commissioner, the former KwaZulu-Natal acting commissioner Manqoba had even instructed him to try and stop that investigation, instructed him to stop that probe into Thoshen Pandey. And he also went into detail about alleged attempts to bribe him and initially leading to the arrest of Thoshen Pandey and one of the police senior officials, Nivan Madu, who was also implicated in attempts to try and bribe Johan Booysen to try and stop that particular investigation. But it didn't stop there, of course. There were attempts to also buy dockets that were made after that. And also, we did hear him alluding to the fact that also some senior officials within the NPA itself, the National Prosecuting Authority that is, were also involved in attempts to try and quash and frustrate some of those critical investigations, and especially the investigation into Thoshen Pandey, which was ultimately not prosecuted till this day, despite overwhelming evidence that had been collected by the investigators. But of course, he went on to describe also a campaign to try and target those who had been involved in those particular investigations. And I think his testimony not very different from that one that we heard from the former IPID boss, Robert Bride, who also spoke about the deep rot within the police service, as well as the patronage that had been taking place in the police service, which he says was a worrying factor that has led the police service to lose credibility and to lose faith with the South African society.
Yeah, reportedly, he also spoke about the alleged looting of the Secret Service account as well, if I recall correctly. What did he say in this regard, Manqoba?
Well, of course, it did allude to the fact that there was looting of the secret fund. Of course, the secret fund is a fund that is used for criminal investigations by crime intelligence. So he says that this fund was used to pay for things that it was not meant to pay. For example, he brought up the issue of the former police minister and now arts and culture minister, Nathi Mthethwa, who said that this fund, certain funds or certain monies from this fund were used to pay for security upgrade at his home in Mpangeni, which he says when that issue was raised, of course, that issue was denied at that point, but it later emerged that actually those payments were used or were taken from that secret fund. But what he says is that this was evident that there was looting of that secret fund and that those who were involved in it were content to try and target those who were asked questions and also to try and frustrate any investigations or questions that were raised about the looting of that fund.
So, Manqoba, the commission was on a bit of a break. I know the names of the upcoming witnesses tend to be kept secret. Do we have any insight into the timetable for the next couple of weeks?
Well, Blaine, at this stage, as you've correctly said, we are not quite sure who's going to be next testifying here. But what we do know is that, as I mentioned earlier on, that this phase in particular is dealing with the capture or the alleged capture of the law enforcement agencies. So we do expect that more witnesses are going to be led with regards to this claim. And also we do expect to hear more just how some of those key institutions like the NPA had been captured. I think Johan Booysen this morning is going to continue on that same thought. He's going to explain really the role that was played by, amongst others, the now former Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, Manqoba, as well as the Special Director of Public Prosecutions, Lawrence Mchunu, and really their role in trying to frustrate some of those cases and also initiating criminal charges against those who were contempt on investigating these serious allegations, as well as serious investigations which included some of the top police officials as well as those who were politically connected to several ANC officials.
Are they kicking off at 10 o'clock this morning, Manqoba?
Yes, indeed, Blade. We are starting at 10 o'clock this morning and we're expecting to go up until 4:30 this afternoon. So that's the word that we have at this current stage, that we are definitely resuming at 10.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, my friend. We'll try to catch up with you a little later on. That was SABC's Mchunu Mchunu live for us in Parktown, Johannesburg. Well, the Eastern Cape has 4 universities and 8 public colleges constituting thousands of potential voters.